Today we are going to do section 3.2, use parallel lines and transversals. So today those relationships that we talked about yesterday will become a little more meaningful to us. Identify two pairs of each type of angle. So there could be multiple possibilities. We just need two pairs for each type. Akira, can you give me a corresponding pair? 1 and 9 would be corresponding. Good. Again, lots of possibilities here. That is one of them. Deidreana, what's another? Angle 3 and which one? 11. Good. Angles 3 and 11 also work for corresponding. If you put other ones like 1 and 3 or 2 and 10, 5 and 13, those are all corresponding. We're just looking for two pairs. All right, who can give me a pair of alternate interior angles? John?
6 and 9.
6 and 9, I would agree. Those are alternate interior. And another pair, Ariana?
Angle 5 and
10. Angles 5 and 10, good. Again, other possibilities. Could have used 2 and 7, 6 and 3, 7 and 12, 8 and 11, 14 and 11, 10 and 15. There are lots of possibilities. Alternate exterior. Looking for new hands. Brianna. 1 and 14, I agree. Would be alternate exterior. Another pair. Oh, where are our hands? Yanni. 2 and 13. I agree. Those would also work. 2, 13. All right. What about consecutive or consecutive interior? I'm about to start picking on people. Trista, what do you think for consecutive?
7 and 11.
7 and 11 works for me. Consecutive interior angles. And we need one other pair of those. Taylor?
Would angle 5 and angle 9 work?
Yes, they would. Angles 5 and 9 would work as well. All right, last up is vertical. This was not something we learned yesterday, but we have talked about it, so we should be able to identify vertical angles. Kobe, what do you think for vertical angles?
1 and 6.
Good. Angles 1 and 6 are vertical. Sean, can you give me another pair of vertical angles? 3 and what?
8.
Good. 3 and 8 are another pair. Questions about our angle relationships? Okay. All right, we've got a note. Certain angles are congruent if the transversal intersects two parallel lines. If the two lines are parallel, then certain angles are going to be congruent to each other. Okay, so we have our postulates. They have their if-then form. They're already in if-then form, so we're going to shorten them up in a diagram that shows it. So, on all of our diagrams, we're going to have parallel lines that are cut by a transversal. Okay. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine. You could have them slanted different ways, but we should have a parallel lines cut by a transversal. How will I know that these two lines are parallel in my diagram? I need to put some triangles on them. Okay, so we'll put those triangles on there. I should probably also name them if I'm going to talk about them. What do you want to name them?
A and B.
Sure. Lines A and B. And we need a pair of corresponding angles to be labeled. So I'll label these angles as 1 and 5. If you used a different pair of corresponding angles, it would be okay. So if we're using this diagram, we could say that if A is parallel to B, then it says corresponding angles are congruent. So angle 1 is going to be congruent to angle 5. If the lines are parallel that are being cut by the transversal, then the corresponding angles are going to be congruent. Okay, so with this diagram, again, my lines A and B should be parallel to each other, so I'll put the triangles on them. So this time, if A is parallel to B, then my alternate interior angles are congruent. So I would say angle what is congruent to angle what?
4 is congruent to angle 6.
Good. Angle 4 is congruent to angle 6. Kind of ran out of space down at the bottom there. So alternate exterior angles, if you haven't already, it needs another diagram. We can still call these A and B. They should still be parallel with the triangles. This time we're talking about what kind of angles? Alternate exterior. So again, if you want to label 1 and the other one 8, sure. And again, we would say if A is parallel to B, then what?
Then angle 1 is congruent to 8.
Good. Then angle 1 is congruent to angle 8. Again, this would also work for our other pair of alternate exterior angles. We just didn't label them this time. Consecutive interior angles. Again, we need our diagram. Lines A and B being parallel to each other. Cut by a transversal. Labeled with our triangles. All right, so this time we're talking consecutive. So I'll go with these two angles, 4 and 5. So this time, if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of consecutive interior angles are?
On the same side.
They're not congruent. That's the tricky part about this. We get in this pattern, everything's congruent, congruent, congruent. These ones are supplementary. So part of the reason why I like calling them same side angles instead of consecutive sometimes is because of the S's. Same side, supplementary. So the consecutive interior or same side interior angles are supplementary instead of congruent. They're like the odd man out. So again, if A is parallel to B, then, and you could word this a couple different ways. You could just say angles 4 and 5 are supplementary, but what does it mean to be supplementary? They add up to 180. So you could say the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 5 equals 180. Okay, corresponding alternate exterior and alternate interior, I'll give you congruent angles on parallel lines, but consecutive gives you supplementary angles instead. All right, the measure of 3 of the numbered angles is 63 degrees. Identify the angles and explain your reasoning. So they mean 3 other ones, not including the one that they already told you is 63 degrees. So who can give me one of the other angles and a reason why? Yanni?
2 because it's vertical.
2 wouldn't be vertical. Which one's vertical to it?
Oh, 4. I mean 1.
1. Good. So angle 1, the measure of angle 1 is equal to 63 degrees because it's vertical to the one that they gave us. John, you got another one?
Angle 7.
Angle 7, why?
Because one is a alternate exterior.
Okay, so you could say alternate exterior to angle 1, but why don't we try to base it off of the one that they already labeled, Kobe? It's corresponding. So I agree, John is correct. Those would have to be the same. But if we're going to try to base it off of the one that they gave us originally, corresponding would work. Deidreana, you got the other one? Angle 5. And why is angle 5 63 degrees? I agree, but what's its relationship to the one that they gave us initially?
Interior.
What is it?
Interior.
Not just interior.
Alternate.
Alternate interior, good. So it's not wrong to relate it to other angles, but just to be consistent, I wanted to relate them back to the one they initially gave us. Kobe, you got a question?
What is number 6? Be the same as the same
6 would not be because it is consecutive to the 63 that they gave us. So 63 and this angle 6 would have to add up to what? 180. So 6 is considered consecutive to the initial one, so it would not be congruent. Okay, another way to think about it is that 6 and 7 form a linear pair. And again, we already knew 7 was 63, so these two also have to add up to 180. Oop, sorry. Anybody need more time on that one? I didn't mean to skip ahead. Okay, we're ready to skip on then. Find the value of x. Now again, and it's hard to see from the back here, but they did already mark those lines as being parallel. That has to happen. If you don't know the lines are parallel, you can't use these relationships. But because those lines are parallel, the two angles that they marked should be equal or congruent because their relationship is what? They're congruent, but why?
Because they're parallel.
The lines are parallel, but what's the relationship between the angles? They're not vertical because they occur at different intersections.
They're alternate.
I think we had a group effort there. They are alternate exterior angles. Okay, so this one, they kind of turned our diagram a little bit differently. But again, interior is in between those, exteriors on the outsides. So, with all that being said, yes, we can set them equal to each other because they are congruent. And then we just have to solve by
Dividing.
adding 4.
To each side,
And then dividing by 3, we get x equals 39. Okay, and that's all they wanted, so we're done with that one. Questions, concerns? Moving on. All right, on this one, they want us to find the values of both x and y. On this one, it might be helpful to only look at parts of the diagram at a time. Now, on your page, obviously, it might be a little harder to do this. But if I want to focus on just my parallel lines and the transversal that looks like it's going straight across, that means I can ignore this other line completely. Okay, I understand you can't necessarily erase it, but you can kind of highlight or trace over the parallel lines and the transversal that's going through the middle. And if that's what we focus on, even if we redraw it over here, parallel lines, transversal through them, how are those two angles that are marked related? Alternate interior, so they must be congruent, so x is equal to 50. I'll stop there for just a second. Do we have questions about that process before we bring back the other information? Sometimes it helps to ignore certain parts of the diagram, only focus on what you're really going to need. Bless you. Okay, so we're ready to bring back the rest of the diagram? Some of you are looking at me like I'm crazy right now. Do we not get this? Questions? Okay. I'm going to bring back the rest of the diagram, and we're going to do the same kind of thing, except this time we want to focus on the other transversal. So again, we're using those same parallel lines, but this time I'm going to highlight the other line that crosses them, which means I'm going to ignore this one from the middle. So yes, I think even without redrawing it again, I'm hearing people say corresponding, and that is correct. And we know corresponding angles are congruent, so y must equal 80. Okay, so sometimes you will not necessarily need every part of the diagram for every part of the problem. Pick and choose what you need at what time. Questions about example 3? Okay, we'll keep it going. Another find the value of x question. This one's a little tricky because hopefully if I were to ask you to describe the relationship between the angles that they labeled, you would tell me that you can't do it. Right? We don't have one for alternate, but one's on the outside and one's on the inside. We only have it for alternate if they're both on the outside or both on the inside. Does that make sense? We don't have a way of describing this. So we have to maybe rearrange things to be able to set up an equation. Anybody have any ideas before I throw mine out there, John?
Move the x plus 5 up so that the angles are supplementary.
Good. And why am I allowed to just move this up here?
Because the parallel angles and they're supplementary.
You're almost there, Yanni.
Because if it was like x right there, it would be congruent to x plus 5 because their relationship is something.
Yep. Corresponding. There we go. That's why. We have parallel lines, so corresponding angles should be the same. So we could bump this x plus 5 up to its corresponding angle, and like John said, then we would know that those are going to be supplementary because they make a linear pair. Questions about the logic behind that? Okay, and if we know that they are supplementary, what can we do with them to make an equation? Add them together and
Equal them to 180.
good. Add them together, set it equal to 180. Okay, when we do that, how can we start to solve this? Combine like terms. 3x plus x. Negative 7 plus 5. Next. Add 2. Then, what do we get? 45.5? Works for me. Questions, concerns? Confusion of any kind?
I thought it was 46.
Is it?
Why didn't you divide it up for?
I don't think so, because 6 times 4 would give us a 4 on the end, and this has a 2 on the end. Let me see. It's you see the fix at the bottom of your calculator? It's rounding it for you. We'll fix that in a minute. Other questions, concerns? Okay. Our homework, of course, on your assignment guide, but also here. We have lots of time, so I better see you being productive the whole time. And if I do not, then we are absolutely staying till the bell today.
I like this